My girlfriend said during a long drive through Colorado. I think we want different futures. I nodded, dropped her at the train station without a scene, accepted a promotion I once declined, and later she heard my name mentioned somewhere unexpected. I think we want different futures. She said it the way someone says something they've been practicing in the mirror for weeks. Not loud, not angry, just settled, like a decision that had already been made long before the conversation started. I kept my eyes on the highway. The Colorado sun was dropping behind the Rockies, and the whole sky had turned this shade of burnt orange that felt almost cruel given what was happening right beside me. I said nothing. She shifted in the passenger seat, tucking one leg under herself, the way she always did when she was bracing for something. "Did you hear me?" she asked. "I heard you," I said, and I meant every word of that. We'd been driving for almost 4 hours, cutting through mountain passes and switchbacks, and up until that sentence, it had honestly been one of the better days we'd had in months. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. I'm 29. She was 27. We'd been together for 3 years and 2 months, and I know the 2 months because she used to count them like they mattered. The drive had been her idea. She'd said we needed air, space, something outside the apartment walls where every conversation had started to feel like a negotiation. So we drove. We talked about small things for the first 2 hours. A podcast she'd been listening to. A documentary I'd half-watched. The kind of conversation that feels easy because it demands absolutely nothing from either person. Then we stopped at a gas station somewhere outside Glenwood Springs, and she went quiet after that. The kind of quiet that has actual weight. I noticed it, but didn't push. I told myself it was the altitude. It wasn't the altitude. She waited until we were back on the highway, back at full speed, with nowhere to pull over easily, and that's when she said it. "I think we want different futures, so I'm going to take you back. Not far, just enough so that this makes sense." 7 months before that drive, I was offered a promotion. Not a small one, a real one. The kind that comes with a new title, a significant salary increase, and a full relocation package to the company's Pacific Northwest office in Seattle. I'd been working at a mid-sized infrastructure consulting firm for 5 years. I'd put in the kind of hours that quietly impress people who've been around long enough to recognize what real sustained effort looks like. My director, a measured man named Harmon who communicated mostly through tight-lipped nods and the occasional firm handshake, called me into his office and slid a folder across his desk without saying a single word. I opened it, read it twice, looked up at him. "We think you're ready," he said. "Question is whether you think you are." I took the folder home that evening. Claire was on the couch, laptop open, work spread around her in that organized chaos she always had going. I set the folder on the coffee table. She looked at it, then at me. "What's this?" "Promotion," I said. "Seattle." She picked it up slowly. "Read the first page. Then the second." I watched her face carefully. There was a moment, just a flash, where I saw something light up in her eyes. And then it was gone. She set the folder back down on the table. "That's far," she said. "It's Seattle," I said. "Not another country. My whole life is here," she said. "My job, my sister, my entire network." "I know. You'd want me to just pack up and go?" "I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm telling you what was offered to me." She was quiet for a long moment. "Do you want it?" she asked. And here's where I made the first mistake. I hesitated before I answered. Not because I didn't know. I knew. I wanted it badly enough that my hands had been slightly unsteady the whole drive home. But I hesitated because I was already measuring it against her. "Against us." "I want to think about it," I said. She nodded like that was a reasonable, good answer. It wasn't. 3 weeks later, I declined the offer. I sent Harmon a professional, carefully worded email about personal commitments and my continued investment in the Denver team. He replied with 3 words. "Door stays open." I appreciated that more than I probably showed. I didn't tell Claire right away. I waited until we were at dinner on a Saturday evening, at a place she liked on Larimer Street, and I mentioned it the way you mentioned something you've already fully processed. "Turn down the Seattle offer," I said. She looked up from her menu. "When?" "Earlier this week." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I'm telling you now." She studied my face for a moment. Was it because of me? It was because of a lot of things. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "Thank you," she said. And I believed her. I believed the gratitude was completely real. What I didn't understand then was that gratitude and confidence are not the same thing. She was relieved I'd stayed, but she wasn't any more confident in us because of it. The months that followed were fine. That's the only honest word for them. Fine. Not terrible. Not great. Just fine. We had good weekends. We had easy evenings. We had the occasional argument that burned out quickly enough that neither of us felt like we'd actually addressed whatever the real thing was. I started noticing small patterns. The way she talked about her future using I more than we. I think I want to go back to grad school at some point. I've been looking at apartments in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. I don't know where I see myself in 5 years. Not us. Just I. I filed it in the back of my mind without saying a word. I told myself it was independence. I told myself it was healthy self-awareness. I told myself I was reading too far into things. But I kept filing. And by the time we got in the car for that Colorado drive, I had a folder's worth of small observations quietly stacked up. I think we want different futures. I finally took a slow breath. What does that mean to you, specifically? I asked. She'd clearly prepared for this conversation. You're driven in a way that I used to think I matched, she said. But I'm starting to realize I don't. I've never asked you to be anything you're not, I said. I know. That's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? She turned to look out the passenger window at the mountains. I mean that I look at you, and I can see where you're going, she said. I can see the trajectory, and I don't know if I fit in that picture anymore. Have I ever made you feel like you don't fit? No. That's the problem. I let that land. I'm confused, I said. It's easier when someone makes you feel small, she said quietly. Then you have a reason to leave. When everything is fine and you still feel like something's missing, it's a lot harder to explain. I stared at the road ahead. So you're ending this because things are too fine? I said. I'm not ending anything. I'm just saying what I feel. Those two things aren't as different as you think they are right now. She was quiet. I was quiet. We had about 40 minutes left before we'd reach the city. Neither of us spoke for most of it. Not because there was nothing left to say, because there was too much, and neither of us had the energy to start unpacking it properly on a highway at dusk with nowhere to pull over. When we finally came off the interstate and into the edges of the city, she said it. I have a train to catch. Her sister lived in Colorado Springs. She'd planned to spend a few days there after our trip, and the original arrangement was that I'd drop her at Union Station before heading home. I nodded. Okay, I said. She glanced at me. I think she expected more from that moment. A fight, maybe. Tears. Or at least some version of, can we please finish this conversation properly? I didn't give her any of it. I drove to Union Station. I pulled up to the curb. She grabbed her bag from the back seat. She stood by the open passenger door for a moment, just looking at me. Are you okay? She asked. Yeah, I said. You're not going to say anything? I looked at her. You said what you needed to say, I said. I heard you. That's it. What would you like me to add? She looked like she wanted me to argue. Like the argument itself would have proven something to her. I wasn't going to do that. I'll call you when I get there, she said. Okay. She closed the door. I watched her walk through the entrance of the station. She didn't look back. I drove home. My apartment felt different that night. Not in any dramatic way. Just different the way a room feels after you rearrange the furniture and your eyes keep landing in all the wrong spots. I didn't eat dinner. I sat on the couch with the TV on and the volume turned low and let the evening pass around me. She did call. Said she'd made the train. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. Neither of us mentioned anything that had happened in the car. She said she'd be back Thursday. I said okay. I didn't sleep much after I hung up. Not because I was crying. Because I was thinking. Very clearly, actually. More clearly than I had thought about anything in a very long time. By 3 in the morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do. The next morning, I went into the office earlier than usual. Harmon got in at 7:30 every single morning. He always had. I was waiting outside his office at 7:25. He raised an eyebrow when he saw me sitting there. Early, he said. I need 5 minutes. He unlocked his office and gestured me in. I sat down across from him. The Seattle position, I said. Is it still available? He leaned back in his chair, looked at me for a long, measured moment. I told you the door stays open, he said. I know. I'm asking specifically if the role is still open. It is, he said. We've been interviewing internally, but no decision has been made yet. I want to reconsider. He nodded slowly, the way he did when he was processing something that didn't surprise him at all. What changed, he asked. And it was a completely fair question. The reason I declined no longer applies, I said. He studied me for another moment without speaking. I'll make a call this afternoon, he said. Give me until end of day. Thank you. I stood up. Don't thank me yet, he said. The offer may have changed slightly. Budget review happened last quarter. Understood. I walked back to my desk, sat down, opened my laptop, and got straight to work. And I didn't think about Claire for the rest of that morning. That surprised me. But honestly, it also didn't. Harmon came to my desk at 4:15. Seattle office can meet Thursday, he said. Video call. You available? Yes. Position has a slightly adjusted compensation structure. Still strong, but I want you to see the revised offer before you commit to anything. I'll see it Thursday. He nodded and walked away without another word. My phone buzzed on the desk. A message from Claire. Back Thursday. Can we talk? I replied, sure. She sent a heart emoji. I set my phone face down and went back to the screen in front of me. The Thursday call with Seattle went well. Better than well, actually. The revised offer was stronger in several ways. The base was marginally lower, but the performance incentive structure was considerably better, and the scope of the role itself had expanded. They needed someone who could eventually build out a regional team from the ground up. I asked the questions that needed to be asked. They liked my questions. By the end of the hour, they said the formal offer letter would arrive by Friday afternoon. I thanked them and ended the call. 20 minutes later, Claire knocked on my apartment door. I let her in. She looked like she'd slept poorly for several days. She sat on the couch, her usual spot. I've been thinking a lot, she started. Me too, I said. I want to talk about what I said in the car. Okay. I think I was processing out loud, she said. I wasn't necessarily saying I want to end this. I was saying I'm scared. I looked at her steadily. Scared of what? Of not being enough for where you're going. You've never not been enough, I said. I know, but the feeling doesn't care about logic. She was twisting the sleeve of her sweater between her fingers. I think I've been pulling away because it's easier than admitting I'm scared, she said. Instead of just saying it, I let the silence settle in the room for a moment. I accepted the Seattle position, I said. Her hands went completely still. What? I called Harmon Monday morning. They made a revised offer. I accepted it today. She stared at me. Monday, she repeated quietly. That was the day after. Yes. You decided that fast? I'd already decided, I said. The night we drove back. Without even talking to me. I kept my voice level. You said, very clearly, on that highway, that we want different futures, I said. I took you at your word. I wasn't breaking up with you. Maybe not in that exact moment, I said. But Claire, be honest. Not with me. With yourself. Has anything I've done in the last year made you feel more certain about us? She opened her mouth. Closed it. That's what I thought, I said quietly. So that's just it, she said. Her voice cracked at the edges. I'm not angry at you, I said. I'm not trying to punish you. But I turned down a genuinely important opportunity for a relationship that you yourself admitted you weren't sure was going anywhere. I didn't say that. You said you didn't know if you fit in my picture, I said. You said something was missing. You said you thought we wanted different futures. I paused for a moment. Which part of that was me misunderstanding you? She pressed her fingers to her lips. I was scared, she said again, softer this time. I know, I said. And that's completely real. But being scared isn't the same as being in. She looked around the apartment slowly. At the throw pillow she'd picked out. At the coffee table book she'd bought me as a joke that I'd actually kept. At the small things you leave behind in someone else's space when you're building something together. When do you leave? She asked quietly. End of the month. She nodded. She didn't cry. Neither did I. She stood up after a while and quietly collected the few things she still had there. A charger, a scarf, a book she'd been meaning to finish for 6 months. At the door, she turned back around. I hope it goes well, she said. I know you do, I said. Take care of yourself. She left. I closed the door. I stood there for about 30 seconds. Then I went back to my laptop to review the offer letter that had just arrived in my inbox. Moving to Seattle at 29 is a different experience than moving somewhere new at 22. At 22, you're unformed enough that any city can shape you. At 29, you arrive with edges. You know what you like in a neighborhood. You know which coffee shop you'll actually sit and work in versus the kind you imagine yourself working in. You know how to be alone without being lonely. I knew all of those things by then. And Seattle accepted me without asking me to be anyone I wasn't. The Pacific Northwest office was smaller than Denver. About 40 people total. The kind of environment where you learn everyone's name in the first week and have to deliver results from day one because there's simply nowhere to hide behind the size of the operation. I like that. My closest colleague there, a straight-talking project manager named Ben who'd been with the firm for 11 years, told me on my second day, people watch new leadership closely here. The first 3 months set the tone for everything that comes after. I nodded. Then let's not waste the first 3 months, I said. He grinned like I'd said exactly what he was hoping to hear. Good answer, he said. The work was harder than Denver. A better kind of harder. The problems were more complex, the clients were more demanding, and the internal dynamics required more navigation than anything I'd dealt with before. I was genuinely stretched. And being stretched felt like exactly what I had needed without knowing I needed it. I stopped thinking about Claire somewhere around the 6th week. Not completely. Not in the way where someone simply vanishes. But she stopped being the background noise of my days. She became something I thought about occasionally. The way you think about a song you used to love, with warmth, but without ache. Ben asked me once, over beers after a long Friday evening, whether I'd left someone behind in Denver. Sort of, I said. Mutual. Complicated. They always are, he said, and raised his glass. I raised mine. We drank, and I genuinely didn't feel the need to say anything further. The first year in Seattle was the foundation. The second year was when things started to compound in ways I hadn't anticipated. We landed a major infrastructure contract with a regional port authority that the firm had been pursuing for years. I led the proposal team. We won the contract. Harmon flew up from Denver to personally deliver the news, which was about as emotional as Harmon ever got. This is the kind of thing that gets remembered, he said. The team did the work, I said. You built the team, he said back, and that was the end of the conversation. The port contract generated a features piece in a regional business publication. Not a household name. One of those industry trade journals that most people outside the sector have never once heard of. But within infrastructure consulting circles, it circulated widely. My name was in it. My approach to the project was described in real detail. I read it once when it came out, set it aside, and went back to work. I didn't post it anywhere. I didn't send it around to anyone. I mentioned it briefly in an email to my parents, who were proud in the quiet, measured way they'd always been proud of me. Life in Seattle continued at its own pace. I found a neighborhood that felt right. Found a running trail that cleared my head before early meetings. Went on a few dates over those months, some enjoyable, none serious. I wasn't looking for anything urgent. I had built something that felt genuinely mine in a way my Denver life, comfortable as it had been, never quite did. About 22 months after arriving in Seattle, my firm was invited to present at an infrastructure and urban development conference in Chicago. A 3-day event that drew city planners, private sector firms, municipal consultants, grant administrators, and everyone who operates somewhere at the intersection of policy and development. I was presenting on the second day. A 40-minute session on the regional port project, the methodology, the stakeholder navigation, the scalability model we developed. I prepared for 3 weeks straight. Not because I was nervous, because I respected the room enough to show up ready. The conference was at a hotel in the Loop, and by the end of the first day, I'd already had 4 conversations that felt like they could genuinely matter over the next several years. I went to dinner that evening with 2 of them. A project director from a Chicago municipal office named Aldrich, and a woman running infrastructure grants for a Mid-Atlantic foundation named Nora. Nora was sharp in a way that made conversation feel less like networking and more like actual exchange. She asked good questions, pushed back when she disagreed with something, laughed at the right moments without trying. By the end of dinner, Aldrich had excused himself for an early morning, and Nora and I ended up talking at the bar for another hour and a half past that. She was from Portland originally, had spent considerable time in D.C. before landing at the foundation. She'd been to Seattle twice and liked it both times. We exchanged cards at 11:30 with the kind of ease that feels like the beginning of something, though neither of us put a name on it. I went back to my room thinking that Chicago was turning into a better trip than I'd expected. I presented on the second day to a room of about 200 people. It went well. I could feel it going well in that specific way, where the room's attention never drifts, where the questions afterward are the kind that mean people were actually listening. After the session, during the coffee break, I was standing near the back answering a follow-up question when I felt a shift in the air behind me. The kind you register without quite knowing why. I finished answering and turned around. And there was Claire. She looked almost exactly as I remembered, and also slightly different the way people always do after nearly 2 years of not seeing them. Same dark hair. Same way of standing slightly angled, like she was always half prepared to walk somewhere else. She was looking at me with an expression I couldn't immediately read. "Hi," she said. "Hey," I said. There was a pause that lasted a beat longer than comfortable. "I didn't know you were presenting here," she said. "I didn't know you'd be here either," I said. "Are you with a firm?" "My company does some urban planning work," she said. I started with them about a year ago. That's a change from what you were doing in Denver. A good change, she said. Good. She was looking at me steadily. Your session was really good, she said. Thank you. No, I mean, she stopped. Seemed to recalibrate slightly. I was in the room. The whole 40 minutes. I didn't realize it was you until maybe 15 minutes in. And then She shook her head. I kept listening. I looked at her evenly. I'm glad it was useful, I said. It wasn't just useful, she said. Another pause. People moved around us, refilling coffee, breaking off into side conversations. Can we catch up? She asked. Are you free this evening? I have dinner plans, I said. Something passed across her face. Tomorrow morning, maybe? She asked. Before the conference wraps up? I considered it genuinely. Not because I was playing any kind of game. Because I actually had to decide whether I was interested. Coffee at 8 before the morning sessions? I said. Yes, she said. That works. We agreed on the hotel cafe. She walked away into the moving crowd. I stood there for a moment with my coffee, and I wasn't sure exactly what I was feeling. Not hurt. Not triumph. Just steady. Completely steady. Dinner that evening with Nora and 2 others was easy and unhurried. At one point, Nora mentioned a morning session she'd attended. There was one presentation in particular, she said. Infrastructure consultant from Seattle. Made the entire room pay attention. The person sitting across from me pointed in my direction. He's the infrastructure guy from Seattle, he said. Nora looked at me across the table. That was you. Afraid so, I said. She laughed. You're modest, she said. That was the best presentation of the whole day. I had 22 months of material to work with, I said. Still, she said. She was looking at me with something that had moved slightly past professional interest. I noticed. I liked it. We talked until well past midnight. When we said goodnight in the lobby, she mentioned she would be in Seattle in about 2 months for a foundation site visit. We should have dinner when you're in town, I said. I was going to suggest exactly the same thing, she said. Coffee with Claire the next morning was at 8:15. She was already at a table when I arrived. 2 cups sitting there. She still knew how I took my coffee. Some things stay regardless of everything else. I sat down. Thank you for making time, she said. It's fine, I said. She wrapped both hands around her cup like she was thinking about where to start. I've thought a lot about what to say, she began. And then I decided I was just going to say the honest thing. Okay, I said. When I heard your name announced yesterday before I even turned around, she said, I felt something. I wasn't expecting that at all. What kind of something? She seemed to pick her words carefully. Proud, she said. Which is strange, because I don't really have a claim on that. You can feel proud of someone you used to know, I said. That's not strange. It wasn't just pride. She met my eyes directly. It was also regret. I said nothing. I've replayed that car ride a lot, she said. More than I'd like to admit. Okay. I wasn't brave enough, she said. What I said, the way I said it, I was testing something. I wanted to see if you'd fight for it. Fight for us. And I didn't. No, she said. You didn't. Because what you said in that car wasn't a test I was willing to pass, I said quietly. Tests like that only work when the other person doesn't know they're being tested. But I wasn't confused about what you meant. I'd been watching you pull away for months before that drive. She looked down at her cup. I know, she said. You were honest, I said. I respected that. I took you seriously. I wish you'd been a little less serious, she said with a small, sad laugh. I smiled. Not cruelly. Just honestly. I couldn't have stayed and meant it, I said. After that conversation, anything I gave you would have been lesser. You deserved better than someone who was only partly there. She was quiet for a moment. You seem different, she said. 2 years will do that. Good different, she said quietly. You seem like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Yeah, I said. I think I am. She nodded slowly. Are you happy? She asked. Getting there, I said. Which honestly feels better than thinking you've already arrived. She smiled at that. A real smile. The kind I remembered from the early days before everything got complicated and careful. Are you? I asked. Working on it, she said. Good, I said. That's a real answer. We sat there for another 20 minutes. The conversation shifted into easier territory after that. What she was doing now, where she'd moved, how the job change had shifted things for her. She'd relocated to Austin. Liked it genuinely. She sounded like she meant every word of it. When the time came to wrap up, we stood at the same moment. She hugged me. A brief hug, but a real one. I'm glad I ran into you, she said. Me too, I said. And I meant it completely. Not as someone who still wanted something from her. As someone who had been part of something real that had ended exactly the way it needed to end, and had now become something else entirely. A chapter with a clean last line. We walked out of the cafe in opposite directions. Neither of us looked back. The conference wrapped that afternoon. On the flight back to Seattle, I sat by the window and watched Chicago shrink beneath the clouds. I thought about the last 2 years. About the night I'd driven home from Union Station with silence filling every corner of the car. About the morning I'd showed up at Harmon's office before 7:30. About the first time I stood in my Seattle apartment and realized it was becoming mine. About Ben telling me the first 3 months set the tone for everything that follows. About the port contract. About the article. About the presentation that had apparently made a room of 200 people pay full attention. About Nora's card in my jacket pocket and the easy way she'd laughed across a dinner table. About Claire's face in that cafe, sitting somewhere between what used to be and what she was still figuring out. I didn't feel like someone who had won something. I didn't feel like someone who had proven a point to anyone. I felt like someone who had made a difficult decision when it needed to be made, put in the work that decision required, and arrived somewhere real because of it. That felt like enough. More than enough, actually. The plane leveled off above the cloud cover. Outside the window, everything was white and vast and still. I closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I felt no pull toward anything behind me. Just the steady particular weight of a life that was fully, clearly mine. I texted Ben when the plane landed. Good trip. Back in the office Monday. He replied within 3 minutes. Port Authority wants a follow-up meeting. Also, someone from a federal infrastructure grant office called about a potential partnership. I think Chicago had consequences. I smiled at my screen. Good ones, I typed back. He sent a thumbs up. I collected my bag from baggage claim. Walked out into the cool Seattle evening. The air was clean and slightly damp the way Seattle air always is, carrying that particular mix of salt and pine that I'd come to think of as the smell of a decision made correctly. I flagged a cab, gave my address, settled back as the city came around me. Familiar, alive, mine. 2 months later, Nora came to Seattle for the site visit. I'd half wondered if the dinner invitation would quietly fade the way conference connections sometimes do when real life reasserts itself. It didn't. She texted me 3 weeks before she arrived to confirm. We had dinner at a place in Capitol Hill that I liked and that she immediately approved of without having to think about it. The conversation ran 4 hours without either of us once checking the time. She was exactly as sharp as I'd remembered from Chicago, and also warmer outside of the conference context. She laughed more easily, talked about her family in Portland, a sister in Vancouver, a complicated relationship with her father that she described with both clarity and a kind of earned grace. I talked about Denver, about the years before Seattle, about what it had actually taken to get here. I didn't talk about Claire specifically, but I talked around the shape of what had happened, the choice that had looked like loss and turned out to be direction. Nora listened the way she had at dinner in Chicago, where you could tell she was genuinely processing what you were saying rather than preparing her next line. When we finally stepped outside, the Seattle night was cool and lit up quietly. This was the best evening I've had in a while, she said. For me too, I said. I think I'll be back in Seattle in about 6 weeks, she said. The site visit didn't quite cover everything we needed. 6 weeks is a reasonable amount of time, I said. Is that your way of saying you'd like dinner again? It's a very direct statement that I'd like dinner again, I said. She laughed. I liked that laugh a lot. We said goodnight. She got in her rideshare. I walked the 3 blocks home. The city was quiet in its late-night way, streets still but the lights all on. I walked slowly, not because I had nowhere to be, because I wanted to be present in the moment I was actually living rather than already inside the next one. That was the thing the last 2 years had taught me most clearly. The value of being present in a life while it's happening, not reviewing it constantly, not projecting 3 steps forward, just living in it, cleanly and fully, and letting it be exactly what it was. A year after Chicago, a longer piece ran in a national infrastructure trade publication. It covered the federal partnership, the port contract, the methodology we'd developed and continued to refine. My name appeared prominently this time. Ben framed a copy of it and hung it in the office kitchen without telling me, which was both embarrassing and the kind of thing you quietly remember for a long time. Harmon sent a brief email. 2 sentences. Well done. The door was worth keeping open. I smiled at my screen. Replied with a single, thank you. Closed the laptop. Walked out to the kitchen. Stood in front of the framed page for a moment. Thought about the night the apartment was quiet, and the TV was low, and everything had become very, very clear. Thought about the highway and the burnt orange sky. Thought about the train station curb and a door closing without a sound. And then I poured myself a coffee and went back to work. Because here's the honest truth about all of it. No story like this has a clean moral. No one in this is a villain. Claire wasn't one. She was someone who told the truth from a place of fear, and that truth turned out to be the most useful thing she ever gave me. I wasn't a hero. I was someone who got hurt quietly, made a decision quickly, and then put his head down and worked. The outcome wasn't guaranteed. It never is. I could have gone to Seattle and struggled and come back smaller for the experience. The timing could have been wrong. The contracts might never have materialized. Nora might have stayed a business card in a jacket pocket. None of it was written in advance. But the decision to take the space that was offered to me, honestly, without anger, without a scene at a train station curb, that part was entirely mine to make. And I made it. At 7:25 in the morning, sitting outside a director's office. With a clear head and a simple question. Is the door still open? It was. I walked through it. Everything else followed from that single step. Nora asked me once, maybe 8 months into figuring out what we were to each other, whether I ever regretted not fighting harder before I left Denver. I thought about it for a real moment before answering. No, I said. Why not? She asked. Because I was fighting, I said. The whole time I was there, I was fighting. Just quietly, and in all the wrong directions. She tilted her head slightly. And Seattle? Seattle was me finally fighting in the right one, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, that's a good way to put it. I had 2 years to work out how to say it, I said. She smiled. That particular smile she had when something landed as both funny and true at once. I'd come to love that smile a great deal. I didn't say that out loud right then, but I already knew I would eventually. Because that's the other thing about getting genuinely out of your own way. It doesn't just clear the path professionally. It clears everything. Makes room for the right things to arrive without you having to force them into shape. And when they do arrive, you're not too full of old grief to recognize them for what they are. You're just there, present, open, ready in a way that doesn't come from luck or perfect timing or the universe lining things up neatly. The kind of ready that comes from a specific choice made on a specific night when the apartment was quiet and the TV was low and everything finally became very, very clear. Some nights I still drive. Not in Colorado. Here, the Pacific Coast Highway north of Seattle, where the water sits right beside the road and the mountains appear in the distance like they're reminding you of scale. I drive without music sometimes. Just the road and the dark and the particular quiet of a life moving in the direction you chose. I think about nothing for stretches. Or I think about the week ahead. Or I turn something Nora said over in my mind because it's still sitting there productively. Occasionally, very occasionally, I think about that drive through Colorado. The sky going orange behind the Rockies. Her voice, steady and rehearsed and honest in the only way it knew how to be. I don't feel anything complicated when I think about it. I just feel grateful. Grateful she said it. Grateful I heard it clearly. Grateful I didn't ask her to take it back. Some gifts don't arrive wrapped the way you'd expect. Some doors only open because another one closed. And some futures, the ones you actually end up living inside, are the ones you never could have reached. By standing still.